All right, so I just finished up the 2024 Vet Worlds at Glen Helen, and I thought, I did an initial real quick review on like what I did to the bike to get ready, and I thought I'd just go over how Glen Helen was. Nothing like riding a bike with 1.5 hours bone stock on the gnarliest, roughest. That track is probably all year long. So I thought it was a good, I'd do a video saying, hey, I put this bike to the test, and just talk about how it was, what I did, and the things I noticed. Because, sometimes you'll think a bike is great, but then you get it out and race and you realize, like, it's not as good as I thought it was, or I'm not as good as I thought I was on it. I went out, when I was on my Yamaha, I set a goal of top 10. I'd like to be top five, but those guys in the 40 Pro are pretty fast in the top five. So I said top 10, a reasonable goal. Switched to the beta a week before the Vet Worlds. Had to race it bone stock. Aside from my suspension guy, Chris from Baron Suspension, put a little bit more high speed in the shock. That's it. Just to get rid of that kind of wallowy feeling I had with the shock. Stock forks, bone stock forks. All I did was spring them. Bone stock engine, stock pipe, stock bars, stock grips. Everything was stock on this bike. Put it to the test. I got eighth overall in the 40 Pro, which I was really happy with. I went 9.8. My second moto was a lot better than my first moto, and that's because I learned some things in the first moto racing this bike about how to set it up, and hopefully this will help some people trying to race it. First of all, is this bike raceable at, I'm a vet pro, the pro level in stock form? 100%. Yeah, it's totally raceable. It's actually one of the most raceable bike stock that I've ever ridden. Feels very similar to the Yamaha. Um, it comes with KYB suspension, which we all know is very good suspension. The only other bike that I think Yamaha Beta and the KTM, I think those are the most raceable bike stock. Some of the other Japanese manufacturers, their valving settings and spring settings are way off, and you got to kind of mess around with trying to get the spring settings right. Stock, the springs are very balanced on this bike. I think for your average guy, 165, 55 pounds, maybe 175, stock springs are good. I had to go up on spring rates. So what I did was I put a 5.9 in the back. Initially, I had a 6.0 Yamaha spring in the back, and that was just to pass the time. So on race day, my wife brought me the actual 5.9 beta spring, which actually gave me more correct static sag numbers, right around 35 millimeters and 103 sag. That's where I ran it the whole day, was at 103. So the first moto, I was having not a really hard time, but just a hard time initiating my initial lean into corners. And it kind of felt to me like the forks were a little long on the bike. So what I did was I dropped it down to the line on the forks. I had them at about 3 millimeters initially, and now I'm just down at the line that is cut into the forks. And second moto, bike turned way better. Didn't have an issue initiating the corners. Um, First moto, I had 5.2 springs in the front, and I was getting head shake on decel. And I know the valving is a little soft on this bone stock. So what I did was I just upped it to the 5.3 spring rate in the front to give it a little more hold up. And the thing with head shake, I always look at it a very simple way. If I'm getting head shake under acceleration, that means my front end's too light and doesn't have traction with the ground. That means my forks are too stiff. At Glen Helen, I was getting head shake on deacceleration under braking. So as I was letting off the gas, chopping the throttle, my forks were diving too low in the stroke. So what I did, I couldn't valve them there. So what I did was for the second moto, I actually switched spring rates from first moto to second moto. Second moto, forks were awesome. My bike was handling very good. Motor wise, it's a bone stock motor. Up the hills, I never got past up the hills once. I feel that power wise, even though some people will say this bike is slow, it's not slow. It's deceivingly fast. It reminds me a lot of like the KTM. When I first got a KTM, I thought it was kind of slow, but it put out the most horsepower. So this bike, deceivingly fast. The only issue I had was my starts were horrendous, but that was operator error. I wasn't used to the hydraulic clutch on it, and I had my clutch out a little too far, and on both starts, I just spun and dug a hole. Then I hit the cement, realized I was playing catch up once the gate fell, hit the cement. Glen Helen has a very strange start. It's about 4 feet of cement. It goes dirt, 4 feet of the old cement, and then dirt again. So by the time I hit the cement, then I spun even worse, and my starts were not that good. Does this bike have the potential to pull whole shots? I believe so. It's just me. I never even did a practice start. My only two practice starts were Moto 1 and Moto 2. So they wouldn't let me do practice starts during practice at the World Vet. I ran the scoop on the back. My second moto was really baked and hard packed. Ran a scoop, still worked really good, and I think it's a benefit. I think the scoop is more of a benefit than it is a drawback. You get way more power, pull up the hills, tire bites in, and I don't feel the side to side. I'm not a big scrubber guy, so the scoop doesn't really hinder me. I never feel like I get that side to side action that they talk about with the scoop. Somebody else might feel that. Ran the scoop. I ran a Pirelli front tire, the MX32 mid soft. But yeah, all in all, is this bike competitive? I had no bike issues the whole weekend. I pulled a top 10, which was my goal on my Yamaha that I had been riding for a year. So I pulled a top 10 on a brand new bike with 1.5 hours on it, totally foreign bike to me. Hopped on it, was raceable, competitive, was right where I should have been. But yeah, the only things, there's a spring rate chart on beta, and that is pretty accurate, I think, for your average rider. Like, go off the weights. If you're a faster guy and you need more hold up in that front and you're running just stock valving and trying to get by, I went up 2 spring rates from what they recommend. They recommend, I believe, a 5.1 for a 210-pound guy, and I'm up, I think, 2 spring rates on that spring rate chart. So if you're you're a really fast B rider or an A rider, even a vet A rider, you're going to need a little more hold up if you got that stock valving. So just go a step or two stiffer on the front end. Spring is good. I think their spring recommendations are good weight wise. Yeah, so I didn't really do much else, to the bike. Just ran it stock. I ran some ETS MX18 in it. That seemed to help give it a little pep when I was getting on the gas. But yeah, I guess I'm nothing like riding a brand new bike that I've never ridden before. Put a ride or two on it, and then go race the biggest race I'm going to do all year in the World Vet and the 40 Pro. But yeah, super happy with the bike. Really nothing much else to talk about. Just kind of what I did at the 40 Pro. But is it raceable and competitive? 100% yes. The suspension is not that far off like some of the other reviews have said. They had a hard time with the suspension. It wasn't. I've definitely ridden worse bikes that were stock than this one. I'm going to get it valved eventually, but for now, it's good enough. I feel like I'm right up to speed on it right away. All right, cool. Thanks for watching.